The clatter of heels echoed across the marble floor as high-level executives bustled through the towering glass headquarters of Titan Holdings. At the very bottom of this grand structure, unnoticed by most and acknowledged by few, worked Amara, a quiet and diligent cleaner. Often as a child and raised in a government-run home, Amara had known hardship her entire life. Her hands were rough from years of scrubbing, her back sore from bending over endless corridors, and her dreams, those once vivid colors of childhood, had faded into dull gray reality. She worked silently each day, her presence blending into the background like furniture. No one knew her name, but everyone saw the results of her effort: spotless floors, gleaming surfaces, and bins emptied without fuss. Amara had always believed that her life was destined to be ordinary, confined to mops, buckets, and overlooked corners. But one rainy Thursday afternoon, everything changed. As she pushed her cleaning cart out behind the building to take a short break, she noticed an elderly woman huddled near the dumpster, drenched, shivering, and visibly shaken. Without hesitation, Amara ran to her, removing her own thin jacket and wrapping it around the woman's frail shoulders. "Are you okay, ma'am?" she asked softly, crouching beside her. The woman looked up, her eyes filled with tears and a kind of despair Amara recognized instantly. "No, child. I've been thrown out," she whispered. "By my own family." Amara didn't know it yet, but this simple act of kindness would shatter the boundaries of her world. She had just saved none other than Mrs. Victoria Titan, the estranged mother of the billionaire who owned the company she worked for. And nothing in Amara's life would ever be the same again. Amara guided the frail woman to a small janitor's rest room tucked behind the employee changing area. Though the room was bare and smelled faintly of bleach, it was warm and dry. She handed the woman a towel and offered her a thermos of warm tea she'd brought from home. The woman's hands trembled as she accepted it, her lips chattering from cold and distress. "Thank you, child," she said hoarsely, after a long sip. "No one else even looked my way." "What's your name?" Amara asked gently, trying not to show her concern too deeply. The woman hesitated before speaking. "Victoria. Victoria Titan." Amara blinked, confused. Titan. That was the name of the billionaire who owned the company, Mr. Damon Titan. Was it a coincidence? "I'm Amara," she replied simply, choosing not to ask questions just yet. It didn't matter to her who this woman was, what mattered was that she was alone and clearly in pain. Victoria's eyes studied Amara's humble expression, her kindness evident even in silence. "You remind me of someone I lost a long time ago. Someone who used to care." Amara offered a small, sad smile. "Sometimes, strangers become the family we never had." As Victoria rested, Amara knew she couldn't leave the woman out in the streets. She made a bold decision, one that would lead her into a world of luxury, secrets, betrayal, and redemption. For now, she would protect this woman, no matter the cost. The next morning, Amara returned to work with Victoria hidden safely in her small shared apartment. She told her flatmate, a quiet cook named Joy, that Victoria was a distant relative in trouble. Joy didn't ask questions, just gave a nod and helped prepare soup for the elderly woman. At the Titan Holdings building, Amara moved through the halls with new awareness. She cleaned the boardroom while men in expensive suits backed orders and secretaries darted in and out. It felt strange to walk beneath portraits of the very man whose mother now sat in Amara's home wrapped in a borrowed blanket. She finally gathered the courage to ask a fellow cleaner, "Do you know the CEO's mother?" The woman scoffed. "Victoria Titan. She disappeared years ago. Rumor has it she was sent to a care home, then vanished. Some say Mr. Titan's wife didn't like her meddling." Amara's heart sank. So the story was true? Victoria had been thrown out of her own family, abandoned despite the billions in the Titan name. It was unthinkable. And now, Amara had to decide what to do with the truth. That night, Amara asked Victoria why she hadn't returned to the mansion. Victoria looked out the window, her voice distant. "My son isn't who he used to be. His wife, Cassandra, she wanted me gone. He didn't fight for me." Amara clenched her jaw. For someone with nothing, it was hard to imagine abandoning the people who loved you. But she promised herself she would help Victoria find peace, and maybe, find her place too. Meanwhile, at the Titan mansion, Cassandra Titan paced the marbled hallway of her estate. Her perfectly manicured fingers tapped against a glass of wine. She had told the staff Victoria had left for a spa retreat, but she knew the old woman wouldn't stay silent forever. Damon doesn't need distractions, Cassandra muttered to herself. He has a company to run and a legacy to protect. Damon Titan, tall and brooding, sat in his office reviewing financial reports. He hadn't thought much about his mother lately, which haunted him in brief, silent moments. Cassandra had convinced him Victoria would be happier in the countryside. But he hadn't received any recent calls or letters. Guilt clawed at the edges of his mind, though he pushed it aside. Back in the city, Amara had started reading Victoria's old letters, stored carefully in a worn leather pouch. They were filled with love, concern, and wisdom, and all unanswered. The woman had begged for reconciliation, only to be ignored. Amara's resentment toward the billionaire began to grow. How could a man with so much turn his back on someone so kind? But Victoria didn't want revenge. I just want to see his eyes soften again, she whispered. I want to know he remembers who he was. Amara didn't believe in miracles, but perhaps fate had put her in the right place. Somehow, she would find a way to confront Damon Titan, if not for herself, then for the mother he had forgotten. 1 week later, the company announced a staff-wide party to celebrate Titan Holdings' 20th anniversary. Even cleaners were invited, though only to serve food and tidy up. Amara saw it as her chance. She put on her cleanest uniform and stepped into the grand ballroom of the Titan skyscraper. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above her as golden-clad waiters moved about. The powerful and wealthy mingled, sipping champagne and laughing over shallow conversations. From the corner, Amara saw him, Damon Titan. He stood tall in a black suit, surrounded by investors and board members. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and distant. But for a split second, Amara caught a flicker of emptiness behind his cool exterior. He didn't seem cruel, just lost. She approached quietly with a tray of drinks, hoping for a moment. But Cassandra spotted her first. You? Cleaner. Out of the way, she hissed, her voice sweetened with venom. Amara stepped back, her cheeks flushing with shame. But her heart burned with renewed resolve. She had seen Damon. She knew he was reachable. And now she had to find a way to speak to him without Cassandra blocking the path. Later that night, Amara returned home and found Victoria awake, reading. I saw him, she said softly. Victoria's hands trembled. Did he look happy? No, Amara replied. He looked like a man surrounded by gold but drowning inside. Amara spent her next free day helping Victoria write a letter, one final attempt to reach her son. They crafted it by hand, using Victoria's careful script and Amara's simple but sincere suggestions. It was a heartfelt note, filled with childhood memories, her longing to reconnect, and an apology for anything she might have done wrong. Amara delivered it to the Titan building under the guise of cleaning duty and slipped it into Damon's private inbox. Days passed. No reply. Victoria began to lose hope, though Amara refused to let her despair. Sometimes people build walls so high they forget what it's like to feel, Amara said. Unbeknownst to them, Damon had received the letter, and read it. Twice. But Cassandra found it in his drawer and tore it up before he could respond. She's manipulating you, she told him coldly. She chose her path. Don't look back. But the words lingered in Damon's heart. He began having dreams of his childhood, warm kitchens, bedtime stories, and soft lullabies. The woman in those dreams had the same handwriting as the letter. And though he didn't realize it yet, the cracks in his stone heart had begun to form. Cassandra became increasingly uneasy. She noticed Damon growing quieter, distant. She blamed stress at work, but deep down, she feared something else, ghost of the past returning. She hired a private investigator to quietly find out if Victoria was still alive. Discretion, she warned. I want to know if she's been seen anywhere. Meanwhile, Amara found herself being watched more carefully. A supervisor warned her she was too curious and reminded her to stay in her place. But Amara wasn't afraid. She had already crossed the line the day she brought Victoria into her life. One afternoon, while leaving the building, she noticed a black car parked across from her home. Was someone following her? Victoria urged Amara to let it go. They'll find me eventually. But we have to believe Damon will choose love over control. Amara wished she could believe it too. But in the world of billionaires, it was hard to trust the heart. By a stroke of luck, Amara was assigned to clean Damon Titan's executive floor one quiet morning. He wasn't scheduled to be in, but halfway through her duties, he stepped in alone, typing furiously on his phone. Startled, Amara tried to excuse herself, but Damon waved her off. "It's fine," he said, eyes never leaving his screen. Gathering courage, Amara cleared her throat. "Sir. I'm sorry, but did you get a letter recently?" His head jerked up. "What?" "From someone named Victoria." He stared at her in stunned silence. "Why do you ask?" "She's alive," Amara said softly. "She misses you." For a long moment, Damon didn't move. Then, without warning, he stood and left the room. Amara feared she'd overstepped. But that night, Damon found himself sitting alone in his study, wondering who the girl was, and how she knew his mother was alive. The investigator returned to Cassandra with a single photo, Victoria Titan entering a shabby apartment building. Cassandra's worst fears were confirmed. She clenched the photo in her fist. "She's not gone," she whispered. She knew she had to act fast. She began planning how to silence this quiet orphan girl who dared meddle in her life. Cassandra was dangerous when threatened. Amara, meanwhile, returned home to find Victoria pale and coughing. The stress and years of neglect were catching up to her. She needed medical care. Amara used her meager savings to take her to a clinic. "She's exhausted," the doctor said. "But with care, she'll recover." Amara sat by Victoria's bedside that night and whispered, "I won't let anything happen to you. You deserve to be seen, to be loved." And in her heart, Amara knew it was no longer just about Victoria. She was fighting for herself too, for a life where she was no longer invisible. The next morning, Damon sat in his office and stared at his mother's torn letter. He tried taping it back together. The pieces didn't quite fit, but the message remained. He picked up his phone and searched for her name in public registries. Nothing. Then he remembered the cleaner, the girl with sad eyes and quiet strength. He called the janitor department and asked for her file. When they hesitated, he insisted. "Just give me her name." Amara. That evening, Damon stood across the street from Amara's apartment, hidden behind tinted glass. He watched as she carried groceries inside and paused to help an old man cross the road. There was something about her. Something real. He didn't know it yet, but Amara was about to change his life in ways he never expected. And the war between heart and legacy had only just begun. 3 days after he watched Amara from across the street, Damon Titan made his move. Amara was finishing her shift when a security officer approached with a note. It was handwritten, signed simply, DT. "Come to the rooftop. 6 p.m. Amara's heart pounded. Was she in trouble, or was this her chance? She climbed the stairs to the rooftop and stepped out into the golden wash of the setting sun. Damon stood by the railing, looking out over the city, his hands in his pockets. "You came," he said without turning. "You asked," Amara replied quietly. He turned to face her, his eyes guarded but curious. "Tell me the truth. Is my mother really alive?" Amara nodded. "She's with me. She's been sick. Hurt. She still loves you." Damon exhaled, pain flashing across his face. "I thought I was protecting her by stepping away. I thought she wanted distance." "No," Amara said, voice steady. "She needed her son. She still does." Damon was silent. But in that moment, the seed of change had been planted. That night, Damon made a decision. He drove alone, hood pulled low, and knocked quietly at Amara's apartment. When Victoria opened the door, her breath caught. Her son stood in the hallway like a stranger, aged and distant. She reached out, tears in her eyes. Damon. He stepped forward and embraced her gently. For a moment, time folded in on itself, the mansion, the years, the wealth, all forgotten. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. They talked late into the night, with Amara quietly preparing tea and slipping into the background. It wasn't her moment, but she had helped build it. Before he left, Damon turned to her. Thank you, Amara. I don't know how to repay you. You don't have to, she said. Just be the son she remembers. When Cassandra learned Damon had visited his mother, she exploded. She manipulated you, just like I said she would. Damon, for the first time in years, stood firm. She didn't. You did. You made me believe she was better off away. Cassandra's eyes narrowed. And the girl? The cleaner. What's her role in this? She's the reason I still have a mother, Damon said, leaving the room. Cassandra's fury grew. She began digging into Amara's background, determined to find a weakness. She wouldn't let some orphan ruin everything she had worked for. But Damon no longer trusted Cassandra's words blindly. The spell was breaking, and so was their bond. The next day, Damon called Amara into his office under the pretense of maintenance. She stood nervously as he offered her a chair. I want to help you, he said. I've spoken to HR. There's a position in administration, entry level, but far better than cleaning. It comes with benefits and training. Amara's eyes widened. Why me? Because you stepped up when no one else did. And because you've earned better. Amara accepted, though cautiously. She knew stepping up meant stepping into the spotlight, and Cassandra's line of fire. Still, she couldn't deny how it felt to be seen. As Amara began her new role, small things began going wrong. Her lunch was tampered with. Files went missing from her desk. Her email was hacked. She suspected Cassandra but had no proof. When she confided in Damon, he promised to investigate quietly. Meanwhile, Victoria was recovering steadily, often visited by Joy and a few kind neighbors. She had hope again, for her health and her family. But Cassandra was far from finished. In a lavish dinner party she hosted, she dropped a casual line, "Did you hear the cleaner who moved up? Some say she's seducing the boss." Amara's reputation began to fracture under whispers. Amara decided it was time. She walked up to Cassandra's office one afternoon and asked for 5 minutes. Cassandra looked at her like a bug beneath a hill. "What do you want?" "To ask why you're so afraid of me," Amara said. Cassandra laughed coldly. "You? I'm not afraid. I'm disgusted. You don't belong in our world." "Maybe not," Amara replied calmly. "But I belong in hers. In Victoria's. And Damon sees that now." Cassandra stood, her anger blazing. "Watch your step. People like you don't last long in palaces." Amara met her gaze. "I don't need a palace. Just a clear conscience." A tabloid article appeared days later, "Billionaire CEO's secret romance with ex-cleaner." Photos of Amara and Damon in the elevator, eating lunch in the company garden, and even entering her apartment were leaked, doctored and twisted. Amara broke down, overwhelmed by the public shaming. Victoria comforted her, but the damage was done. Damon, furious, traced the source. Cassandra had hired the PR leak. When he confronted her, she admitted it. "I did it for us." "There is no loss anymore," Damon said coldly. He announced a temporary leave from the company and moved Victoria to a private care residence, with Amara staying nearby. For weeks, Amara avoided the spotlight. She walked in parks with Victoria, read books aloud, and learned basic management skills from Damon's old assistant. Though her world had changed drastically, Amara found comfort in the simplicity of caring for someone and being cared for. Damon often visited, now free from the corporate mask he once wore. They talked openly about dreams, regrets, and what it meant to start over. It wasn't romance yet. But it was real. And it was growing. Meanwhile, Cassandra prepared for one last move, one that could destroy them both. Cassandra filed a false lawsuit against Amara, accusing her of theft and defamation. The media swarmed again. But Damon had prepared. He presented security footage, testimony from staff, and even voice recordings of Cassandra scheming. The judge dismissed the case and fined Cassandra for abuse of the court. Her reputation shattered, her influence waned, and her access to Titan holdings was revoked. For the first time in years, she stood alone. Meanwhile, Amara received an apology from the board, and her role was upgraded again, this time with a permanent contract. 1 year later, Titan Holdings celebrated its anniversary once again, this time, with Amara as the Assistant Director of Community Outreach. Victoria, now fully recovered, gave a speech about grace, family, and second chances. Damon introduced a new charity in her name. And Amara. She stood beside them, no longer the invisible cleaner. She had earned her place, not through privilege, but through courage, kindness, and truth. Later that night, Damon walked her to the rooftop. "You changed everything, Amara." She smiled. "You let yourself be changed." They looked out at the city below, two very different lives woven into something extraordinary. And so, from rags to grace, Amara's story found its light.